In a small, peaceful town surrounded by lush green hills and thick woods, there lived a woman named Sarah Jennings. She wasn't like most people in the area. She carried herself with quiet confidence that made others curious about her. Sarah had served as a Marine years ago, but now worked as a civilian K-9 handler, training military dogs for important tasks like search and rescue missions and security operations. Her job was tough, requiring patience, skill, and an unbreakable bond with her canine partners. Despite her impressive background, many people still doubted her abilities because she was petite and spoke softly. They didn't realize how strong and capable she truly was. Sarah's pride and joy were her two German shepherds, Titan and Luna. These weren't ordinary dogs. They were highly trained professionals who could follow complex commands and act decisively in high-pressure situations. Titan was big and muscular, with a deep bark that could send shivers down anyone's spine. Luna, though slightly smaller, was just as fierce and intelligent. Together, they formed a team that could handle almost anything thrown their way. Sarah spent countless hours working with them, honing their skills and building trust. To her, they weren't just working dogs, they were family. One sunny afternoon, Sarah decided to take Titan and Luna for a walk in the local park. It was a beautiful day, with birds chirping and children playing on the swings. The air smelled fresh, and everything seemed perfect. But as she strolled along the path, she noticed a group of bikers gathered near the parking lot. Their loud motorcycles roared as they revved their engines, creating a racket that disrupted the calm atmosphere. Sarah tried to ignore them and focus on enjoying her time with Titan and Luna, but their laughter grew louder, carrying across the open space. The bikers were rough-looking men dressed in leather jackets covered in patches. They joked around, making crude comments about anyone who passed by. At first, Sarah thought nothing of it. She'd encountered similar groups before and knew better than to let their behavior bother her. But then she overheard one of them say something that caught her attention. "Look at this chick walking those dogs," one biker said, pointing at Sarah. "Bet she thinks she's some kind of soldier." His friends burst into laughter, clapping him on the back as if he'd told the funniest joke ever. Sarah tightened her grip on the leashes, feeling a mix of irritation and determination. She didn't want to engage with them or give them the satisfaction of reacting to their taunts. Instead, she focused on keeping Titan and Luna calm. The last thing she needed was for her dogs to get agitated by the noise and chaos. Still, the biker's mocking tone grated on her nerves. They clearly had no idea what she and her dogs were capable of, and part of her wondered if they'd regret underestimating her. As Sarah continued walking, she couldn't shake the feeling that trouble might be brewing. The leader of the biker gang, a tall, burly man with a scruffy beard, started watching her closely. He exchanged a few words with his buddies, and soon all eyes were on Sarah and her dogs. She kept moving forward, pretending not to notice, but deep down, she braced herself for whatever might come next. Little did the bikers know, they were about to learn a lesson they wouldn't forget anytime soon. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah found herself reflecting more deeply on the encounter with Duke and his gang. It wasn't just the incident itself that stayed with her. It was the ripple effect it had created in her life and the lives of those around her. The apology from Duke and his friends had been unexpected, but it carried weight. For someone like Sarah, who had spent years proving herself in a world that often dismissed her, their words meant something. Not because they validated her worth, she already knew her value, but because they showed that people could learn, grow, and change when confronted with the truth. Sitting on her porch one evening, Sarah watched Titan and Luna play in the yard. Their bond was unshakable, built on trust, respect, and countless hours of training. She thought about how far she'd come since joining the Marines. Back then, she was young and eager to prove herself in an environment where women were rare and often underestimated. There were moments of doubt, times when she questioned whether she belonged. But every challenge she faced only strengthened her resolve. Her dogs became her partners, her confidence, and her greatest allies. Together, they formed a team that could overcome anything. The incident at the park reminded her of all the times she'd been doubted or mocked throughout her career. People saw her as too small, too quiet, or too feminine to handle demanding tasks. Yet each time, she let her actions speak for themselves. Whether it was leading a search and rescue mission or training a new K-9 recruit, Sarah approached every task with precision and determination. And now, thanks to that day in the park, others were beginning to see her the way she saw herself: capable, strong, and unwavering. The community's reaction surprised her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Strangers stopped her on the street to thank her, not just for standing up to the bikers, but for inspiring them to rethink their own assumptions. One woman told Sarah how she'd always avoided conflict, fearing she wouldn't be taken seriously. But after seeing what you did, the woman said, "I realized I don't have to shrink myself to make others comfortable." Another man, a retired police officer, shared stories of his own experiences working with K-9 units and expressed admiration for her skill and composure under pressure. Even more surprising was the influx of support for her K-9 program. Donations poured in from locals who wanted to contribute to her efforts supporting veterans and first responders. Some even offered their time, volunteering to help with fundraising events or assist in training sessions. Sarah was overwhelmed by the generosity, but she also felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her work wasn't just about her anymore. It was about creating opportunities for others to heal, grow, and find strength through the power of human-animal partnerships. One afternoon, while sorting through letters and emails from supporters, Sarah came across a note from a young girl named Emily. The letter was simple but heartfelt. "Dear Ms. Jennings, thank you for showing me that girls can do anything. I want to be like you when I grow up. My mom says we should never let anyone tell us we're not good enough. Love, Emily." Holding the paper in her hands, Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. This was why she did what she did, not for recognition, but to inspire others to believe in themselves. That night, as she tucked Titan and Luna into their kennels, Sarah allowed herself a moment of pride. She wasn't naive enough to think that one incident could change the world, but she knew it had made a difference, even if only in small ways. The bikers had learned a lesson about respect, the townspeople had gained a new perspective, and she had reaffirmed her commitment to her work. Life wasn't always easy, especially when you chose a path less traveled, but every step forward mattered. As she turned off the lights and headed to bed, Sarah smiled to herself. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but she was ready. With Titan and Luna by her side, she knew she could face whatever came her way. After all, true strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about moving forward despite fear, knowing you weren't alone. And Sarah, she had everything she needed to keep going. The days that followed Duke's apology brought a wave of unexpected changes to Sarah's life. The incident at the park had transformed her from a quiet, unassuming figure in the community into someone people looked up to, a symbol of resilience and strength. While Sarah didn't seek out fame or admiration, she couldn't deny the impact it was having on those around her. Strangers approached her with stories of their own struggles, sharing how her actions had inspired them to stand up for themselves or pursue their dreams without fear of judgment. One Saturday morning, Sarah attended a local farmer's market to pick up fresh produce and baked goods. As she walked through the bustling stalls, she noticed vendors calling out to her, offering free samples or discounts. "This one's on the house," a fruit seller said with a warm smile, handing her a basket of apples. "For you and your amazing dogs." Sarah graciously accepted, though she insisted on paying for most items. She appreciated the kindness, but didn't want special treatment. She was still just Sarah, after all. What surprised her even more was the number of people who stopped to talk about her K-9 program. Parents expressed interest in enrolling their children in workshops where they could learn basic dog training techniques. Veterans reached out to ask if they could volunteer, hoping to reconnect with the sense of purpose they'd felt during their service. Even local businesses offered sponsorships, eager to support a cause that resonated so deeply with the community. It was clear that the incident with the bikers had sparked something bigger, a movement toward unity and mutual respect. Duke and his gang kept their promise too. True to their word, they began helping Sarah organize fundraising events for her program. At first, it felt strange seeing them pitch in, setting up booths, handing out flyers, and even participating in charity rides to raise money. But over time, Sarah realized how much effort they were putting into making amends. They weren't perfect, and old habits died hard, but they genuinely seemed committed to changing their ways. One day, while setting up chairs for a community event, Duke pulled Sarah aside. "Listen," he said, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "I know we messed up, but thanks for not holding a grudge." Sarah smiled faintly, meeting his gaze. "Everyone deserves a second chance," she replied. "Just don't waste it." Duke nodded solemnly, his usual bravado replaced by sincerity. In that moment, Sarah saw a side of him she hadn't expected, a man trying to do better, not just for himself, but for the people around him. The highlight of this newfound support came during a fundraising gala hosted by the town council. Sarah had been hesitant to attend, fearing the spotlight would make her uncomfortable. But when she arrived, accompanied by Titan and Luna, the room erupted into applause. People lined up to shake her hand, share their gratitude, or simply tell her how much she meant to them. A young boy named Tawny, clutching a stuffed animal dog, shyly handed her a drawing he'd made of Titan and Luna. "They're my heroes," he whispered before running back to his parents. Sarah held the picture close, touched by the gesture. As the evening progressed, Sarah took the stage to speak briefly about her work. She talked about the importance of teamwork, not just between humans and animals, but within communities. "Strength isn't about being loud or aggressive," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It's about standing firm in who you are and using your skills to make a difference. And sometimes it's about giving others the chance to grow and change." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom nodded in agreement or wiped away tears. By the end of the night, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The support she'd received wasn't just about her. It was about what she represented: perseverance, compassion, and the belief that everyone has the potential to rise above adversity. As she drove home with Titan and Luna snoozing peacefully in the backseat, she reflected on how far she'd come. Life had thrown challenges her way, but each one had shaped her into the person she was today. And as she parked in front of her cozy cottage, Sarah realized something important. The journey wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in her, and to everyone she had inspired along the way. Duke's smirk widened as he misinterpreted Sarah's calm demeanor for weakness. To him, her silence was a sign that she was backing down, too afraid to stand up for herself or her dogs. Emboldened by the cheers of his friends and the growing crowd of onlookers, he decided to push things even further. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" he jeered, taking another step closer. "Your big bad dogs can't handle a little attention." He waved his arms again, this time reaching directly toward Titan's head, as if to pat him without permission. Titan growled louder, his deep voice resonating like thunder. The sound sent a ripple through the air, causing some of the bikers to shuffle uncomfortably. But Duke didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he simply didn't care. "Oh, come on," he said, rolling his eyes. "You're telling me this thing is dangerous. Looks like a glorified house pet to me." He reached out again, ignoring Sarah's sharp command. "Don't touch my dog." Sarah's patience was wearing thin. She had warned him clearly, but Duke either couldn't or wouldn't take her seriously. His arrogance blinded him to the reality of the situation. Titan and Luna weren't ordinary dogs. They were trained professionals who could react in an instant if provoked. And while Sarah always preferred to avoid confrontation, she knew that sometimes boundaries needed to be enforced. This was one of those moments. With a single whistle, a high-pitched, clear sound that cut through the noise, Sarah signaled Titan to act. In less than a second, the massive German Shepherd sprang into motion. Before Duke could even process what was happening, Titan had closed the distance between them with lightning speed. Using only his body weight and precise movements, Titan pinned Duke to the ground, standing over him with authority. The biker froze, his eyes wide with shock and fear as he realized he was completely immobilized. The laughter that had filled the park just moments ago died instantly. The other bikers stared in stunned silence, their smirks fading into expressions of disbelief. No one moved, no one spoke. Even the children playing nearby stopped to watch the scene unfold. Luna stood perfectly still at Sarah's side, her ears forward and her muscles taut, ready to back up her partner if necessary. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, from mockery and chaos to awe and tension. Duke lay flat on the ground, unable to move under Titan's firm but controlled restraint. For all his bravado, he now looked small and vulnerable beneath the powerful dog. Sweat began forming on his forehead as he glanced up at Sarah, his earlier confidence replaced by panic. Hey, okay," he stammered, raising his hands defensively. "I get it. Just call him off." Sarah stepped forward calmly, her presence commanding despite her petite frame. She looked down at Duke, her expression unreadable, but her voice steady and firm. "My dogs aren't here to fight," she said, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. "But they are trained to protect me, and themselves, at all costs. Do you understand?" Her tone left no room for argument. Duke nodded frantically, swallowing hard. Yeah, I got it. Just get him off me, all right." His voice trembled, betraying his earlier bravado. At Sarah's command, Titan released him and stepped back, returning to her side with perfect obedience. The dog sat down beside her, his posture relaxed but alert, as though nothing unusual had happened. For a moment, no one said anything. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to react. Some of them shuffled awkwardly, while others muttered under their breath. The once rowdy group now stood silent, watching Sarah with a mix of fear and newfound respect. One of them finally broke the silence, whispering to his friend, "Man, that woman's got skills." Sarah ignored the murmurs, focusing instead on her dogs. She gave Titan a reassuring pat on the head and tightened her grip on the leashes. Without another word, she turned and continued walking, leaving the stunned bikers behind. As she moved away, the tension in the air slowly lifted, replaced by a sense of quiet reflection. It was clear to everyone present that Sarah and her dogs were not to be underestimated. The leader of the biker gang, a towering man with a scruffy beard and an air of arrogance, finally stepped forward. His name was Duke, and he was known around town for his loud mouth and reckless behavior. He strutted towards Sarah and her dogs with a smirk plastered across his face, clearly enjoying the attention from his friends. The other bikers cheered him on, egging him to say something even more outrageous. "Hey, little lady," Duke called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "What's with the mutts? You think you're some kind of soldier or something?" Sarah stopped walking, but didn't turn to face him immediately. She kept her focus on Titan and Luna, ensuring they stayed calm despite the rising tension in the air. The dogs sensed her unease and stood close to her, their ears perked up and their eyes alert. Duke's comment hung in the air like a challenge, but Sarah wasn't interested in playing his game. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that reacting impulsively wouldn't solve anything. Still, she couldn't ignore the way his words grated against her patience. Duke, however, wasn't done. He swaggered closer, his heavy boots crunching against the gravel path. "Come on, don't be shy," he said, his tone teasing. "You got something to prove, or are those just fancy pets you take for walks?" His friends erupted into laughter again, slapping their knees and hooting as if it were the funniest thing they'd ever heard. One of them shouted, "Yeah, show us what they can do." Another chimed in, "Bet they can't even fetch a stick without tripping over themselves." Sarah finally turned to look at them, her expression unreadable. Her silence only seemed to embolden Duke, who now stood just a few feet away from her. He crossed his arms over his chest, sneering down at her, "What's wrong, sweetheart? Scared your pups can't handle a real man," he taunted, leaning slightly forward as if trying to intimidate her. Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she tightened her grip on the leashes, keeping Titan and Luna steady by her side. The situation was becoming increasingly tense. The bikers formed a loose semicircle around Sarah, their laughter growing louder with each passing second. Some of them pulled out their phones, clearly hoping to capture whatever might happen next. They wanted entertainment, and Duke was more than happy to provide it. He reached out suddenly, waving his hand dramatically near Titan's face. "Aw, look at this big guy," he said mockingly. "All bark and no bite, huh?" Titan let out a low growl, a deep rumble that reverberated through the air. The sound was enough to make everyone pause. Even Duke hesitated for a split second before brushing it off. "Oh, scary," he scoffed, rolling his eyes. "This is supposed to impress me. Please." He leaned in even closer, ignoring Sarah's warning glare. "Tell you what, let's see what these military dogs of yours are really made of." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she remained composed. She knew better than to lose her temper or give in to provocation. Her training had taught her to stay calm under pressure, no matter how infuriating the circumstances might be. Still, she couldn't help feeling a surge of frustration. These men had no idea who they were dealing with, or what her dogs were capable of. They saw her as an easy target because of her size and quiet demeanor, but they were about to learn that appearances could be deceiving. As Duke continued mocking her, Sarah's mind raced. She didn't want to escalate the situation unnecessarily, but she also couldn't allow him to disrespect her or her dogs. Titan and Luna weren't just animals. They were highly trained professionals who deserved respect. And Sarah, she had spent years proving herself in environments where people constantly doubted her abilities. If Duke thought he could bully her into backing down, he was sorely mistaken. With every step Duke took closer to her, the tension grew thicker. The bikers' laughter echoed around them, but Sarah tuned it out, focusing instead on the steady presence of her dogs. She issued a sharp verbal cue to Titan, keeping him in check despite his obvious agitation. Luna stood by her side, her body tense and ready to act if needed. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but her outward demeanor remained calm and collected. She locked eyes with Duke, her gaze unwavering, silently daring him to push her further. Whatever happened next would be entirely up to him. As Sarah walked away, the park seemed to exhale a collective breath. The earlier chaos had dissipated, replaced by an eerie stillness. The bikers stood rooted in place, their loud bravado now reduced to stunned silence. Duke scrambled to his feet, brushing dirt off his leather jacket, but he avoided making eye contact with anyone, especially Sarah. His face was flushed with embarrassment, and his hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his helmet. For the first time, he looked unsure of himself, his usual cockiness nowhere to be seen. Sarah didn't stop or look back. She kept moving forward, her pace steady and deliberate. Titan and Luna trotted obediently beside her, their heads held high. To anyone watching, it was clear that the dogs were not just pets. They were extensions of Sarah herself, disciplined, loyal, and capable. As she passed a group of parents and children who had witnessed the entire scene, one little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Wow, those dogs are superheroes." Sarah heard the comment and couldn't help but smile faintly. It was moments like these that reminded her why she did what she did. Behind her, the bikers began to mutter among themselves. "Did you see that?" one of them said, shaking his head in disbelief. "That dog could have torn him apart if she wanted." Another chimed in. "And did you hear how calm she stayed? Not even a hint of panic." Even Duke, who had been humiliated just moments ago, found himself nodding reluctantly. "Yeah, all right," he admitted gruffly. "She's got guts, and those dogs, they're no joke." Despite their newfound respect, Sarah knew better than to let her guard down completely. People underestimated her all the time. It came with the territory of being a woman in a field dominated by men. But she also knew that proving herself repeatedly wasn't always necessary. Action spoke louder than words, and today her actions had sent a clear message. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. When she reached the edge of the park, Sarah paused briefly to check on Titan and Luna. Both dogs seemed unfazed by the incident, their tails wagging gently as they sniffed the grass. They trusted her implicitly, knowing she would never put them in harm's way unnecessarily. That trust was something Sarah cherished deeply. It had taken years to build, countless hours of training, and an unshakable bond forged through mutual respect. Turning her attention back to the path ahead, Sarah reflected on what had just happened. She hadn't intended to confront the bikers or make a scene. All she'd wanted was a peaceful walk with her dogs. But sometimes, life didn't give you the luxury of avoiding conflict. When boundaries were crossed, it was important to stand firm, not out of anger or aggression, but out of principle. Today, she had defended not only herself, but also the integrity of her work and her partnership with Titan and Luna. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground. Sarah decided to take a different route home, steering clear of the parking lot where the bikers were still gathered. She didn't want any more trouble, nor did she feel the need to gloat about what had happened. Her goal had never been to embarrass anyone. It was simply to remind them that respect was earned, not given freely. As she strolled along the quieter trail, Sarah noticed a few joggers and cyclists giving her curious glances. Word of the incident must have spread quickly, judging by the way people seemed to recognize her. Some offered polite nods or smiles, while others whispered to their companions. A young woman walking her own small dog approached cautiously and said, "Excuse me, I saw what happened back there. You handled that so well. Your dogs are amazing." Sarah thanked her graciously, appreciating the kind words but not letting them inflate her ego. Compliments were nice, but they weren't the reason she did what she did. By the time Sarah reached her house, a cozy little cottage nestled at the end of a quiet street, the adrenaline from the encounter had worn off. She unclipped Titan and Luna's leashes and watched as they bounded into the backyard, their energy undiminished despite the day's events. As she leaned against the doorframe, watching them play, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She hadn't sought out the confrontation, but she had faced it head-on and come out stronger for it. More importantly, she had shown those bikers exactly who she was: a skilled handler, a protector, and someone who wouldn't tolerate disrespect. Not toward herself, and certainly not toward her beloved dogs. The next few days passed quietly for Sarah, but the incident at the park lingered in the air like the aftermath of a storm. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the small town, carried by whispers and shared stories. People who had been there that day recounted every detail: the bikers' taunts, Titan's swift response, and Sarah's calm authority. By the time she ventured out again to run errands, it was clear that everyone knew about her encounter with Duke and his gang. At first, Sarah tried to brush off the attention. She wasn't one to seek recognition or praise, and she certainly didn't want to be seen as some kind of local hero. But it was hard to ignore the way people looked at her now, with admiration, curiosity, and even gratitude. At the grocery store, a cashier leaned over the counter and said, "I heard about what you did. Those guys deserved a reality check." Sarah smiled politely, thanking her but downplaying the situation. "It wasn't anything special," she replied softly, "just doing my job." Despite her modesty, the story continued to grow. Parents told their kids about the brave woman and her fearless dogs, turning Sarah into an unintentional role model. One afternoon, while walking Titan and Luna near the school playground, she noticed a group of children pointing at her excitedly. "That's her," one of them exclaimed. "The lady with the superhero dogs." Sarah chuckled under her breath, waving briefly before moving on. She didn't mind being admired, but she also wanted people to understand that her work wasn't about showmanship. It was about dedication, discipline, and teamwork. Back at home, Sarah found herself reflecting on how much the incident had impacted not just her life, but the community around her. For years, she'd worked tirelessly to train canines for military and civilian purposes, often feeling overlooked or underestimated because of her gender. Now suddenly, people were taking notice, not just of her skills, but of the incredible bond she shared with her dogs. It was bittersweet, in a way. On one hand, she appreciated the validation. On the other, it saddened her that it had taken such a public display for others to see her true worth. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching Titan and Luna play in the fading sunlight, Sarah thought about Duke and his gang. She wondered if they felt embarrassed or angry, or maybe even ashamed, about what had happened. Part of her hoped they had learned something from the experience, not just about respecting boundaries, but about understanding that strength doesn't always look the way people expect it to. Sometimes, real power lies in control, patience, and knowing when to act without hesitation. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. Looking up, she saw a figure approaching cautiously along the path leading to her house. It took her a moment to recognize him in the dim light. Duke. He wasn't alone. Two other members of his gang trailed behind him, looking equally uneasy. Sarah stood up slowly, her body instinctively tensing as Titan and Luna moved closer to her side. Though she remained outwardly calm, her mind raced. What did they want? Were they here to cause trouble? To her surprise, Duke stopped a respectful distance away and cleared his throat nervously. Hey, he began, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. We came to apologize. The words hung in the air for a moment, unexpected yet sincere. Sarah studied him carefully, searching for any hint of mockery or sarcasm. But his expression was genuine, his usual bravado replaced by humility. We were out of line, he admitted gruffly. And we're sorry. Sarah let the silence stretch for a beat before responding. Apology accepted, she said evenly, her tone neither warm nor cold. But remember this, respect goes a long way. Don't underestimate someone based on how they look or what they can do. Duke nodded vigorously, glancing at his friends for support. Yeah, we get it, he muttered. Won't happen again. Before leaving, Duke hesitated, then added, Hey, listen, if you ever need anything, like help raising money for your program or whatever, we got connections. Let us know. Sarah raised an eyebrow, surprised by the offer. After a moment, she nodded. I'll keep that in mind, she said simply. As the bikers walked away, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, the lesson they'd learned would stick, and perhaps they'd carry it forward, spreading a little more respect wherever they went. Sitting back down on her porch, Sarah watched the stars begin to appear in the night sky. Life had a funny way of teaching lessons, she mused, and sometimes those lessons reached far beyond the people directly involved. The months that followed the fundraising gala brought a profound transformation, not just in Sarah's life, but in the entire community. The ripple effect of her actions continued to spread, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. People who had once doubted her or underestimated her now looked at her with admiration and respect. The incident with Duke and his gang had become a turning point, not just for Sarah, but for everyone involved. Duke and his friends underwent their own quiet revolution. They weren't perfect, old habits occasionally surfaced, but they made a conscious effort to change. Duke began volunteering regularly at Sarah's K9 program, helping train new handlers and assisting with events. His rough exterior softened over time as he found purpose in giving back to the community. One day, while working alongside Sarah during a training session, he admitted, I used to think showing weakness was the worst thing you could do. But watching you, you're strong because you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Sarah smiled faintly, knowing his words carried weight. Change wasn't easy, but it was possible, and Duke was proof of that. Sarah's K9 program flourished beyond her wildest dreams. With the influx of donations and volunteers, she was able to expand its reach, offering free workshops for children, veterans, and first responders. Families brought their dogs to learn basic obedience skills, while others sought guidance on building stronger bonds with their pets. For many, the program became more than just training. It was a place of healing, connection, and hope. Veterans struggling with PTSD found comfort in working with therapy dogs, while kids learned valuable lessons about responsibility and teamwork. Titan and Luna remained her steadfast companions, embodying everything Sarah stood for: loyalty, discipline, and unconditional love. Their presence alone inspired those around them. At every event, people marveled at how well-trained and intuitive the dogs were, often asking Sarah how she managed to achieve such a deep bond with them. "It's not about control," she would explain. "It's about trust. When you show an animal respect and care, they give it back tenfold." One crisp autumn morning, Sarah received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Emily, the young girl who had written to her months earlier. Inside was another note, along with a photograph of Emily standing proudly beside her own dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Max. "Dear Ms. Jennings," the letter read, "thanks to you, I started training Max using the tips I learned at your workshop. He's not perfect, but we're learning together. My mom says I remind her of you, brave and kind. Thank you for being my role model." Sarah pinned the photo to her bulletin board, feeling a swell of pride. If even one child grew up believing in themselves because of her example, then all her hard work was worth it. As winter approached, Sarah took a rare moment to pause and reflect. Sitting on her porch with a warm cup of tea, she watched Titan and Luna play in the snow. The world felt quieter now, calmer. She thought about how much had changed since that fateful day in the park. What had started as a simple walk with her dogs had turned into a catalyst for growth. For herself, for Duke, and for the entire town. Life had a funny way of teaching lessons, she mused. Sometimes, it took a little chaos to reveal the strength hidden beneath the surface. For Sarah, the journey wasn't about seeking recognition or validation. It was about staying true to who she was, no matter what challenges came her way. Her bond with Titan and Luna reminded her daily that real power lay in unity, in standing firm when tested, yet remaining compassionate enough to forgive. Together, they had faced adversity and emerged stronger, proving that courage didn't come from loud declarations or aggressive acts. It came from quiet determination, unwavering resilience, and the belief that respect was something earned, not demanded. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Sarah leaned back in her chair, content. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but she was ready. With Titan and Luna by her side, she knew she could face anything. And though she didn't seek fame or glory, she understood the impact of her actions. By simply being herself, strong, patient, and kind, she had inspired others to do the same. In the end, Sarah's story wasn't just hers. It belonged to Duke, who learned humility, to Emily, who discovered confidence, to the countless strangers who found hope in her example. It was a testament to the idea that even small acts of courage could create ripples of change, shaping the lives of those around us. And as she sat there, wrapped in the warmth of her home and surrounded by the ones she loved most, Sarah realized